I'm Amber Hall. I'm the Director of Institutional Research here on campus. Leslie, I know, works a lot with my office. My office is the official data source of the institution. So that's where I come into play.
And then I am Kim Ashley Polly, and I am the Research Compliance Officer. I am under the Office of Research and Sponsor Programs. So we do grants, contracts, but we also do compliance. So we're housed all in the same suite. Both of you, I know here, have both done IRB, so you're familiar with that process. So that's how I come into play. And what we're going to discuss today, we work together in taking care of this designated school official, that process. So I'll let you. Oh,
it should work. Evidently, that was not mine to work.
okay.
Okay, so this is the basic agenda for today. We're going to go over the definitions of an IRB, what a designated school official is, the IRB process, and then the designated school official process if you need that. We'll go over those circumstances. So the key concepts we're first going to go over are IRB, FERPA, what is an education record, directory information, and a legitimate educational interest.
So the definition, as you can see, is the Institutional Review Board is a university committee, and we serve as an important role in the protection of the rights and welfare of human research subjects. Our purpose mainly is to review research and to assure both in advance and by periodic review that appropriate steps are being taken to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects participating as subjects in research.
Okay, so this is the definition of FERPA. I know many of you guys will hear it. You'll hear it in your required annual training, but this is just kind of gives you the basic definition of FERPA. It's really about protecting the privacy of the student. And part of FERPA is understanding who owns the data and what can the data be used for. And that's what we're going to go over. So what are an education record? So, and that goes back to FERPA. So FERPA protects a student's education record. So this is giving you the definition of an education record. It also will say something in here about its personally identifiable information. So many of you guys will do research and it's just a big old database. Even if you can by line figure out who the student is, if you look at that, that's still personally identifiable information, even if you've taken off an ID or an SSN or some other identifier. So this is to say everything is an education record and it is protected under FERPA.
And I'll just add to that, IT has now developed a data usage policy and a data management policy, and it actually defines that in there on what is considered personally identifiable information and how that has to be protected and what can and cannot be used. So I have not shared that with you, but that has been shared with the university.
So this is what our institution currently defines as directory information. So this is the information that you can get on any student who has not done a FERPA. There's another form where they can just hide all of their information. But this is the information that you can always get on a student. So many times when we do data requests or give data out, if these are parts of the data, we don't have to follow FERPA. So yes, my office produces aggregate data, but just because the data is aggregated doesn't mean it's FERPA compliant. The law within the state of Arkansas is if the count has to be above 10. So the count of everything has to be 11 or more for us to release it and it being FERPA compliant. But one of the catches always is if you're doing, I think of it as a plus and a minus, if you're doing two sides of it. So like a passing and a failing. Well, the passing number might the numerator might be above 11, but the subtraction, the people who were failing is below 11, then you can't produce it. So, or give it out. So if you have a 99% success rate or 100% success rate, because nobody failed, or you can't put it out there. Does that make sense? In those situations, it's kind of a bugger too. So you do have to watch on that, but this is all the information that is under directory information. So a lot of times we try to look at, is this part, like, can I call the registrar's office and find this by just saying, is this student enrolled? And the data is released, so we don't have to worry about the first counts. So this is what constitutes a legitimate educational interest. So FERPA permits a university employee to get access to data for legitimate educational interest. Just because you're an employee of the institution doesn't mean you have rights to any data or all data. So even if the student is one of your students, you will have rights to that coursework, but not the other course. And so that's also where it comes into play of, you might have access to certain things, but you're not supposed to have access to other things. So you don't get everything. And so that's what the legitimate educational interest.
And in regards to IRB, we often have faculty that want to look at numerous courses over the course. They may want to go back 3 years. And without permission and informed consent stating that they have permission to use those grades for research, I'm often the one that says, no, you can't do that. And they don't like that because they feel like those grades are accessible. They were the professor, they can access them. But because they didn't get prior permission, they cannot use that data for their research unless they got permission prior to those students leaving.
So this is, kind of mentioned it already. So curiosity does not constitute a legitimate educational interest. Because you have access to it does not mean that you are supposed to go and look it up. And this is a lot of the second one is, everybody believes because they're an employee of the institution, they have the rights to everything on campus. You do not have rights to everything on campus. And that's why you have to have a legitimate educational interest to be a designated school official. So, and this is just extra. So it goes into legitimate educational interest. It's specific, meaning the specific records. And then the next one is, so the student records are records of the university, and the university through administration has ultimate authority rather than an individual employee. So that is one of the things that I've encountered. Just because someone's supervisor, their supervisor can't just authorize them. That's why we have a designated school official process. The person on our campus that designates school officials is the provost. So the provost is the one who designates them. So not an associate provost or anybody in the provost office. The provost is the one who designates a school official if it's part of their job duties. Because I have had people email me and say, well, I assigned it as their job duties. Oh, but that wasn't their job duties as it was assigned by the provost when it went through like a PAF and such. Just because your supervisor says that does not mean it's okay. So we just go through a little bit extra paperwork, but it's fine. Okay, so the next key concept we're going to go over is what is a designated school official? What is the designated school official process? And also if you need to get an IRB with Kim. So this is one of the kickers that some people do. A designated school official does have to be a university employee. So one of the things that I do have to always ask is who's doing the research? Are they an employee of the institution? Because especially when we get students and GAs involved, they do put some clarifications in FERPA. I was reading my quick guide this morning, and sometimes they'll put a little bit more clarifications. Lawyers will reinterpret always. So So right now they do have to be a university employee. So that's one of the things that I always ask. Are they an employee? And also, how would the institution benefit from your research? Because just because you want to research it doesn't mean you can do it. So this is kind of our little flow chart of how to, if you need the native school official. So the first thing you want to ask is, do you intend to share the data in any form with an external point? So if you do not, you're just going to contact me, because you can still get access to data on students and such for an internal process and such, but we just go through a non-formalized procedure. Yet again, I'll go to the provost after you kind of give me a little bit around of information. I'll just go to the provost, see if you can have it. She'll sign off, and then we go that route. But if you do want to give this to an external audience, then the first step is coming to my office to confirm that we do have access to the data. Because I don't know how many times I've heard on this campus, our student population is such and such and such and such and such and such. Well, we don't have the data. Nobody's ever had the data. Just because someone says it doesn't mean that the data exists. So we always want to have that conversation with you in the beginning before you start a lot of the formalized process, to make sure the data does exist before you go through all the paperwork. So we do ask that you start the conversation with us just to make sure that it exists. And then, so if we don't have the data, then it goes to reconsidering your data needs. So if we do have the data, then you would go to Kim.
Okay. So the IRB process for a designated school official, often people will, faculty will come to me with an IRB. Again, I'll reiterate what Amber just said. Prior to starting the IRB process with an application, I always tell everyone to please email Amber, contact her, have a phone call, have a meeting to make sure that the data that they're going to be requesting is even accessible. Sometimes they put a listing of data in the IRB, and half of it cannot even be, under FERPA law, cannot even be accessible. So I always say, meet with Amber first. Once you've met with her, she will give you a listing of what you can access, which will then go into your application. So the process would be, as you can see, you'll fill out the IRB forms, which is the link right there. And then you'll send the application to me at this website, researchcompliance@uca.edu. Again, you'll put the accessible data in there. You're going to put the purpose and the explanation of how it will be used and the benefit to our institution. Will all be listed on the application, and then the process would then move on to, if it's an exempt application, those are reviewed 1 to 3 days. But we have, even with exempt, I send them to the chair of the IRB to make sure that she is in agreement with what is being asked. Once it has gone through review, it comes back to me. If there's any revisions that need to be done, they are sent back to the primary investigator. And once those are done, I will give you a approval memo, which I then will share. When I email that approval memo back to you, I also CC Amber on that. So that way she will know that you've gone through the process and that IRB approval has been granted.
So the next thing is, does it mean that you have access to student data? So if the student consented to access, for you to accessing their consented data, then yes, we do have a process in my office that if we're the ones going to provide the data, that we have a form that the student can go and fill out, that we've gone through with legal, to give you access to their data. So if they consent, then we'll go through that process of setting up that form and making sure they sign all the documentation that the legal counsel requires. But if they did not consent, then you go through the designated school official process.
Mm-hmm.
So this goes here. So has IRB approved your research? Yes. And you have consent, then you'll contact my office. Yes, I do not consent, then you will go through the designated school official process. So in this one, it does say contact OIR, so if you've already collected the forms to get their consent, then that's one way, but yes, I do have ways to do an electronic form to get their consent. So this is the website for the school official process. You can go to uca.edu, it's on the IR, it's school official. You would then first fill out the application, and then part of the application process is you reading the NCS technical brief. It's mentioned in the application. And that's what that bottom document is.
Yeah,
If we don't have any intention to be a school official in the next year, but we do in a few years, could that still be applied, just to apply to be one, or do you need to have a research goal in mind before you apply?
You can apply, but you do have to have that research, because so the provost is designating you a school official for certain fields or certain variables in the system for that research. So you would have to, it would be only applicable for that specific project, because I do have several people who go through the designated school official process multiple times, I mean, for each of their projects. Does that make sense? So this is the 3-step process that to become a designated school official for after your IRB, you'll do the application. We'll do an OIR review process. It's where I just go in and have a conversation with you about all the data that you're wanting. And because I also will send it up to the provost, and then the provost reviews it, and she will either approve or deny your application. And so, as always, it just says err on the side of caution. If you're unsure which part, you know, because there are a lot of things, if you need to be a designated school official or not, just call or email me and such. And then I put these at the end because
yeah. Oh, the questions.
yeah,
Okay,
previously we had done this in an
Right.
interactive environment. So we had put polls in it as a
Mhm.
part of to keep going through it. So this is this kind of reminders. Can you use your students' past or your past students' grade for courses that are taught in my research study?
No.
You can't,
so no.
because they're in the past. You didn't ask for it back then. If you go through the designated school official process, we do, and keep in mind, most people don't know this. I know Leslie does because Leslie works with our office a lot. My office has access to pretty much everything. That's the role of our office. We're the official data source. We have to do records on every student, on every course that student took, every grade they ever took. So if you want something that's part of the past student grades, you can get it through the designated school official process, but if you're asking for their consent, you can't go back.
Right. And they have to have consent.
Yes.
So,
Nope, the next
okay.
one. I'm trying to remember what were some of the things. Oh, how many of you knew you needed to apply for IRB to for access for use of student data in your research? Where that one, I've encountered many things on
Yeah.
this campus. But you do need to ask for an IRB. And I mean, the process that I do with the provost and I communicate. Sometimes daily, sometimes hourly, it just depends on the day. Right now, we're not communicating a lot because I hope she's
Resting.
healing.
Yes,
But a bunch of times we communicate a lot throughout the day because there's several projects we're always working on. So I'm just saying that process that we would go through to be a designated school official, it normally is only caught up on us trying to meet so that I can have send a good informed conversation to her about what it is. She is very used to these coming in. They don't happen a lot, but she is used to it, the process and it going quickly and such. So it's not like she will be sitting on it for 2 or 3 weeks. After we get everything to her, she'll probably make a decision within a couple days.
and then this is just our contact information.
Mhm.
And I always tell anyone, if they're not sure, especially on the IRB side, call me, do an IRB. You'd rather have that in place, then find out that you've collected data and then you can't use it. So
Yes.
I would suggest that you email me, telephone me, whatever works for you, and let's have a discussion. Because it's a very easy, I feel like we have streamlined this and this has become an easy procedure
Yeah.
to do this designated school official.
Yes, and the provost is used to the process now,
Yeah.
and it's very easy because I think the first one or
Couple
two, it was a little bit not as streamlined, but we've worked it out with her. Like there was a few clinks in the form that we needed
Yeah.
to make sure she had options to deny and things of that nature. So we had to
Yeah.
modify the form a little bit, but it's fairly easy now. I can't
Yeah.
think of anything that slows it down other than you do have to meet with me so that I can take a list of values and variables and what you really want to her. Sometimes that's not the only hindrance I've encountered because you guys have class schedules, you're trying to meet in between classes and sometimes I get stuck in meetings. So that's about the only time I've ever really